So I'm going to show how I remember to calculate equilibrium price of a supply and demand curve. And first thing is I'm just going to go over a few things in general. The first thing I have here is you should have two curves or two formulas that you'll be presented with. One is going to be your supply, which is, the S, and the other one is going to be the demand, which is D. So we ended up with 2 here. Our supply is going to be Px equals 2 plus 2Qx, and the demand is going to be Px equals 10 minus 2Qx. So the first part here this is how I kind of set mine up, just to start with the basics. So you're going to have the two curves. And what I always remember is that your demand curve is downward sloping. So you have a downward demand, double D, or you're going to also have the upward sloping supply. I always kind of draw these out here so I can see what's going on to keep track of stuff. Your supply is going to be the upward sloping, which is up here at the top, and your demand is going to be the downward sloping, which is down here at the bottom. If it helps you remember, I always think of the acronyms SD, which nowadays we know a lot of our cameras take SD memory cards, and I like to think that when I'm drawing all of these things out, it's giving me a snapshot of what I'm going to see on the supply and the demand and to know what's going on. So I always think SD for memory card, and it reminds me of taking a photograph, which is basically what we're drawing here, just a picture of what's going on. So the next thing here is that you also have a quantity and a cost that's associated to it. So quantity always goes on the horizontal axis, and cost goes on the vertical axis. And so to keep myself straight on that, I always remember that we're always concerned with rising costs. Like, very rarely do you hear people say, oh man, I'm so worried about costs being, equal across and just staying horizontal across the plane. Like, you always hear about cost, the vertical increase or the rise in cost. So I always think about the rise here and put my cost value on there. The next thing we have here is where the supply and the demand meet each other. You have the equilibrium. So this is this point here that they both cross each other, the supply and the demand curve. And then when you have both of those and you kind of draw these dashes out, you end up with quantity here. So remember we talked about quantity on the horizon, which is how many. And then you've got the amount here on the vertical, so the rising cost. So we know that this point here is going to be a money value, and this point here is going to be a quantity, which is going to tell us how many. And if we put all of these together, this is kind of what this looks like, that whole snapshot. So we have supply, demand, the equilibrium, quantity here at equilibrium, and the cost here at equilibrium. So this is what that whole snapshot would look like together. To show you again, this was from a few cards ago. Here is our supply and demand equations. So the supply, or S, if you remember, which is this line here. So supply is the Px equals 2 plus 2Qx, and that's what this actual slope here tells us. And then the other one is the demand, which was the 10 minus 2Qx. And this is going to be that slope that's here. So we have supply and demand again. And since we're solving for the equilibrium, which is going to be this point right here where these two intersect, we have to think that these two lines should be equal to each other. So what we do is we would set both of these equations equal to each other. So you now have 2 plus 2Qx equals 10 minus 2Qx. So all we did was set the two lines equal to each other, and then we would solve for that. Now, me personally, the easiest way I like to deal with things is I don't like negative numbers. So I try to move the variables I'm solving for to whichever side causes them to be positive. So what I've done is I moved the Q's here to the left side of the equation, which gave me 2qx plus 2qx, and then I moved the 2 to the other side, which makes it a negative, so 10 minus 2. And then from there, it's basic math. You add your q's together, so 4qx equals, and then 10 minus 2, which is 8, divide by 4, and qx equals 2. So here's our graph again, so our supply and the demand, and then the quantity, which is what we just solved for because we solved for Q. So Q for quantity right here is 2. So this line right here happens at 2 on the quantity. But we also need to know the amount here. So how do we get that? Well, we know what the equation is because we have two of them, a supply and a demand. So you can plug that 2, because we solved for Q, into either one. And I just picked one of them. And so I plugged the 2 in. Here's our actual formula here, the 2 plus 2qx. So I plugged in the 2. So 2 plus 2 times 2. 2 plus 4, we have $6. So 6 is going to be our cost or price here. So here's our actual graph again. So we had solved for Q equals 2. And then this is actually happening at a price of 6. And so what does that tell us? At equilibrium, the price is going to be $6 and the quantity is going to be $2. So hopefully that helps you guys remember where to put everything when you draw out your graphs. Thanks.